Popular iridology versus holistic iridology. That's potentially an interesting contrast, isn't it? It's probably safe to say that most people who practice iridology consider themselves to be holistic, but are they really? My name is Judith Cobb. I am a Master Herbalist, Natural Nutrition Clinical Practitioner, Certified Iridologist, and Certified Comprehensive Iridology Instructor. I've been an iridologist for about 40 years now. I've been a holistic health coach for about 40 years, and I've been teaching practitioners like you for about 35 years. I've studied and practiced many styles of iridology over the years. Stay with me to the end, where we're going to look at some eyes and look at the contrast between iridology styles. Especially if you're a nutrition coach, a herbalist, a naturopath, or a chiropractor, or any kind of holistic health coach, and you love the one-on-one side of your coaching business, but your business is not doing as well as you'd like it to. Maybe you're finding you're spending too many hours that you don't get paid for developing client protocols. Maybe your clients aren't coming back as often as they need to because they don't understand the impact of what you can do for them. I'd like you to take a minute and go to this site, bit.ly/3professionalsecrets, enter your details, and download this document. It is going to give you the first 3 most important things you can do starting right now to literally turn your business around and get all of your work done while you are with your clients. When I first started out, there was only one kind of iridology that was available, and I'm going to call it popular iridology. We can also call this North American iridology. These are some of the more readily available iris maps, and in fact, the very first chart I ever owned was this one right here by Bernard Jensen. Now, as we look at comparing North American or popular iridology to the European or the constitutional or the holistic iridology, I really want you to bear in mind that I am not dissing any of these iridologists at all. As a matter of fact, I know many of them, I've met many of them, and I love what they've done. I love what they do. For some of them, it's just not my style. And so I want you to know that I am not being negative about any of these people. What I see happening when most iridologists use these charts is they fall into the trap of popular iridology. And here's what I mean by that. The challenge arises when we see that these maps subdivide the iris into minute sections that would be at most maybe 2 fibers wide, and those fibers, as you know, are called trabeculae. These maps that include such minuscule organ parts as the renal pelvis or the inner ear tempt iridologists to treat the body much like an allopathic physician would, subdividing it and prescribing treatments for those tiny parts. This is not really a holistic approach, is it? You've seen people offering free iris readings on social media platforms, and they focus on teensy-weensy details. If any organ really is only 2 fibers wide, how can anyone really be sure exactly which organ they're looking at? By being off just a tiny bit, it will entirely change the analysis, and suddenly the nose becomes the tongue or the eye becomes the upper jaw. So I practiced North American iridology from about 1980 till about 1990. And I started to get a little bit frustrated with it. And then I got to learn Constitutional Iridology and a truly holistic way of using iridology. It changed the way I work with my clients completely. So this is a holistic iridology map. Notice that instead of being subdivided into little teeny bits, it only includes major organs and organ systems that have an impact on the functioning of the body. Because we don't have a herb that specifically works only on the renal pelvis. But as nutritionists and herbalists and naturopaths, we understand how to support the kidneys through food choices, how to support the kidneys through herbal choices and other supplements. We know how to support the digestion and nourishing the kidneys that way as well. We have iris maps like this one, which are much more inclined to focus on the interrelationship of organs and organ systems, so a really holistic approach, rather than being distracted by minute details that offer very little value in an iridology assessment. This is why it is so important for iridologists to have a solid understanding of anatomy and physiology. We have to understand how the organs work together and how they affect each other. Does that make sense? Let's look at some eyes. The first thing both schools of iridology look at is the color of the eye. Now, in the North American style of iridology, looking at this eye, the assessment would be, oh my goodness, this person has way too much acid. We need to change the diet. We need to clean that acid out. We're going to turn these eyes pure blue. We're going to take the white right out of them. The constitutional way of looking at this says that the white that's in the eyes shows us there is an inherent predisposition that this person is more prone to being over acid. And that appearance in the eye makes us want to ask the question, is there a personal or family history of? And then we would list some high acid conditions. For example, is there a personal or family history of allergies, eczema, arthritis, skin conditions, or kidney conditions? Those are all situations where the acid levels are a little bit elevated. Now, if this client comes back and says no personal or family history, then we're going to juxtapose that against their symptoms, and that's going to confirm probably what we found. This eye, if you're back a little bit, is going to look like a true brown eye, but it's not really a true brown eye. It is a biliary eye. And it has its own set of inherent health predispositions, just like the blue eye did. So does this one, and so does the true brown eye. We're not going to go into great detail on that. What I want you to look at right now is that in this iris, we have a lot of these rings coming around. The North American iridologists would call those nerve rings. And they would say, oh my goodness, this person is under so much stress and they are heading for a nervous breakdown. Very diagnostic, right? Very diagnostic. The constitutional approach to this is instead to say, these are called contraction furrows. And they teach us that this person, this body, has an inherent predisposition towards living more in a sympathetic response. That doesn't mean they're always there. Maybe they've learned how to not be there, but their body is more predisposed to that. When we understand that, we know that we need to support the adrenals and the nervous system through various nutrients, through lifestyle support, various different things. We're never going to erase these rings out of the eyes. They're going to be there forever. This is an inherent predisposition that we see in the eye, and it manifests as potentially as symptoms. But again, we have to ask the question, is there a personal or family history of? And then we could list some of the nerve and adrenal kinds of things and work from there. But we never are telling the person, oh my goodness, you're going to have a nervous breakdown. Or if you do these specific things, you will erase these lines in the eyes, because that just simply doesn't happen. Another thing that a North American iridologist would want to be working with here is they would be looking at all of the brown pigment in here and how unevenly it's placed. They would be talking about acquired toxicity and how this person needs to cleanse. We've got to turn those eyes blue. They're not supposed to be this kind of variegated golden brown. That is not the approach of the constitutional iridologist. The colors in this eye are inherent. The person who owns this eye did not do anything to put these colors there. North Americans, in my opinion, are way too cleanse happy. They spend too much time cleansing and not enough time building and supporting. The dark brown eye is one of my favorite eyes to read, especially when I've got photographs. They're a little harder to read face to face, but with a photograph you can see so much detail. Again, in these eyes, North American iridologists would say there's only two true eye colors, blue and brown. Nothing else should exist. Constitutional says, nah, that's not true. We now know that there are more than two genes that dictate eye color, and so there can be a wide variety of eye colors, and they can all be inherent. They are all inherent. So we're not going to try to do a cleanse to turn eyes any different color. When we look at this particular eye that you see on the screen, we see the contraction furrows, and we know we're not going to cleanse those out. But we see something else that a North American iridologist is going to say, oh my goodness, you have parasites. North American iridologists would call these radii solaris or parasite lines. And we tend instead to not believe that in constitutional iridology. Instead, what we know is that the radial furrows augment the contraction furrows and lend more weight to the contraction furrows, so that we know that this person is more likely to need more support for their nervous system. But again, we need to ask, is there personal or family history of anxiety or stress or depression or whatever the nervous system symptoms might be for that person? And your client will have given you clues. They will have included things like that on their shopping list of what they want your help with. So when you see these signs in the eyes, then it corroborates the story. It explains, it informs why the client has the symptoms they have, right? And when we understand why they have the symptoms they have, or at least some of why they have those symptoms, we can then do a deeper dive as to how to approach that with diet and lifestyle and supplements. Then we want to consider color variations like these flecks of brown and yellow. There's a little bit of yellow right there, and this little bit of rust colored stuff back here that are sitting in the eye. Now, a North American iridologist would say, again, that this indicates acquired toxins that need to be cleansed out, and that cleansing will dissolve these pigments. Nothing could be further from the truth. Constitutional iridology says these pigments are inherent, even if they appeared later in life. You know, the wrinkles that I have here, I didn't have at birth. They built over time, right? But it was my genetic predisposition that said, in part, when they would start forming. Same with the gray hair. That's an inherent predisposition for the hair to begin going gray at a certain time. We have some influence on that, but we don't control it 100%, at least not naturally, we don't. The constitutional iridologist, again, will say that the color of the pigment teaches us which organ has an inherent predisposition to want to be out of balance. And the placement of the pigment teaches us which organ is going to be impacted by that imbalance. So the color of the pigment isn't at all about toxins at all. It's about imbalances and how they are filtering through the body and how they're affecting the body. The North American iridologist again would suggest that this person has an extreme toxic accumulation, which would require massive amounts of cleansing. The nerve rings would mean high amounts of stress in the here and the now that could lead to a nervous breakdown. The constitutional iridologist says that the color here suggests inherent predispositions to liver insufficiencies that could have an impact on digestion and the transport of nutrients throughout the body. The contraction furrows teach us this person is more likely to have a sympathetic nervous system response to most situations if they're not properly supported with nutrients. The contraction furrows also suggest this person is a go-getter. The North American iridologist again would say this person has parasites. The constitutional iridologist would say this person is very prone to having a sympathetic nervous system response, and that if they have an intense lifestyle, they will benefit greatly by supporting the adrenal glands and getting adequate rest. Can you see the difference between the two approaches? One is extremely diagnostic. the other one is not. The next layer of information that we would consider here is the fiber structure. This layer of information adds to our understanding of organ systems and their inherent predispositions. North American iridologists would map each and every one of these lesions. And each lesion means that there is an issue with that organ in that reaction field right here and right now. So this person has concerns right now about the brain, the pituitary, the bronchioles, the adrenals, the kidneys, the perineum, the rectum, the bronchus, and the parathyroid. Oh my goodness. The North American iridologist will also teach that working on all of these areas will make the lesions go away. Wow. The constitutional iridologist takes a step back and looks at the eye as a whole and asks about a personal or family history of endocrine symptoms, especially adrenals and pituitary. And remember, these markings are inherent, which means they may go back 3 or 4 generations and may not mean there's an issue for this person at all. Add to that, if the person has a healthy lifestyle and a healthy diet, they may already be doing the necessary support and may be preventing issues from ever developing. In North American iridology, every marker, every errant fiber, every pigment is a current problem that needs to be addressed. It's pretty overwhelming. With holistic or constitutional iridology, the idea is to integrate the markings to understand how the inherent predispositions can work together to create the symptoms the client is experiencing. Markings may have different value and impact depending on which markings are present and what the symptoms are. More than this, the deeper understanding allows us to easily create programs that address more than just the symptoms, but actually take us to the root of the problem. The North American iridologist would say this person has a weak constitution. Makes it sound like this person is delicate and fragile, doomed to a sickly life. Constitutional iridologist calls this a connective tissue type. With that understanding, we know how to support the digestion, what lifestyle and food choices to recommend to enjoy excellent health. Each and every marking is not important, especially when there are a lot of them, like there are in this iris. We take that step back and look at the big picture rather than dissecting it down into minute bits. When we see and understand the interrelationship of the various constitutional markers, we can work preventively. How powerful is that, to be able to understand inherent potentials and create lifestyle programs that could stall off or prevent the onset of health problems? It's kind of like having a Star Trek tricorder, and we didn't need to get bogged down in every little detail. When we do holistic iridology, using the iris map is the very last step of an assessment. And sometimes we don't use it at all because the constitution, the colors, and the fiber may have given us plenty of information to work with for the time being. We can always go back to the map later on if we need to, right? Really, when we understand iridology in this way, we can actually do a basic assessment from 2 feet away and without any special equipment at all. Practicing iridology using these principles helps us to avoid overwhelming our clients with too much information in each appointment. It helps us to get our client programs designed right in our client sessions. It guides us in the questions we need to ask our clients, and it helps us be much more holistic in our methods with our clients. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of North American iridology. My original training 40 years ago was North American, and I practiced it for 10 years. I had become frustrated with the diagnosing part of it. Then, just as I was about to quit doing iridology altogether, I was led to Constitutional Iridology. I truly love teaching Constitutional Iridology in a very holistic way. The next Iridology certification preparation course that I'm teaching will begin on the 15th of January 2020. The course is called Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, and it's taught by 20 live 2-hour-long webinars. Details are at iridology.education/priority. I hope one day you'll join me for one of my Iridology certification preparation courses. Thanks for being with me today.